Good morning, everybody. My name is Glenn Gerstner. I currently serve as the interim dean of the Collins College of Professional Studies, where I am also an associate professor of sport management. I'd like to welcome all of you who are with us, especially our discussants and presenters who I see are joining us from Austria, Finland, and Dubai. As Basilia usually does, this is a global conference for sure. St. John's is currently celebrating our 150th anniversary. We were founded in 1870. Our college was founded in 1962, the Collins College of Professional Studies. It was called a junior college, where we offered associate degree programs to serve the interests of academically underprepared students in the spirit of St. Vincent de Paul. Remember, we are a Vincentian university. Over the years, CCPS has changed our name a few times, and we've expanded our offerings to include bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs. And at the risk of giving a big head, I want to commend Dr. Montero, Communication Arts, which was our first bachelor's degree program. Well, guess what? International communication, multi-sector communication is now our first PhD program. It's in the final stages of approval by New York State, and we expect to enroll students sometime in 2022. Quite frankly, this is a big deal for our college to have our first PhD program coming up. I take extra pride in serving as interim dean since I'm also a CCPS alumni, class of 1981, when our college was called St. Vincent's College. I was just thinking about that. It's going to be 40 years in May since I graduated. I often tell students that when they study at St. John's, the most important thing they might learn is how to live the Vincentian mission by being sure to help those who may lack in economic, physical, or social disadvantages. At St. John's, we take this quite seriously in our own mission statement. We seek to foster a worldview and to further efforts toward global harmony and development by creating an atmosphere in which all people can prosper and embody the spirit of compassionate concern for others, so characteristic of St. Vincent. Today's conference relates directly to one of the 6 core values of St. John's University, namely truth. And in case you were wondering, the other 5 are love, respect, opportunity, excellence, and service. The Webster's definition of truth is, quote, that which is in accordance with fact or reality, close quote. The problem is these days, there are a few sets of facts that are generally accepted, and reality can be distorted by anyone with a working knowledge of Photoshop or with a bully pulpit, so truths can be repeated so often that the old saying, keep repeating something often enough and everyone will believe it, is more or less an everyday occurrence. So I ask that each of you listen to today's speakers, reflect on their messages, consider how the concept of truth has evolved, and how it can be managed in the modern world. And of course, thanks to the erstwhile Dr. Montero for bringing us all together to discuss this important issue. Once again, welcome, and please enjoy today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn Gerstner, for your kind words and for welcoming us. And we have audience from all over the world, from Vietnam, from Philippines, from India, from Mexico, from Austria, Germany, of course, United States, also from England as well. And I recognize some names there from England. So it's so wonderful to see that this is becoming a real covering the wide range of different parts of the world. Very grateful for you that you joined us, and I'm delighted. In fact, I'm really excited about our discussions today. And before I go to that, I really want to say a word of thanks to my colleague, Professor Mina, Dr. Mina Horowitz, and Dr. Bauer, Thomas Bauer, University of Vienna, for being my brain, partners of my exchange of ideas in preparing for this global conversation. And I always go to them and says, what topic to go for the next? We began this series since the beginning of the pandemic, and says, okay, coming up. Also, I want to thank in a very special way very important people who work behind the scenes and who make us look good. Christina Munch, Kevin James, and our graduate assistant, Jennifer O'Rourke, who is with us, who makes all those things possible technically and make us look good, the flyers and all kinds of stuff. So thank you so much, Kevin and Christina and Jennifer, for being real souls behind this project. just to introduce the topics, in fact, the question of trust is as old as human history. And way back then, I like to always go back to the Greek mythology because I studied quite a bit of that. And so the question comes: Zeus, God Zeus, was tricked by Prometheus. So Zeus decreed that man must present a portion of each animal they sacrificed to the gods. So Prometheus decided to trick Zeus. So he created two piles, one with bones wrapped with juicy fat, the other the good meat hidden in the in the hide. Guess what? Zeus picked the bones. So, and the Greeks had the god of deception, Dolos, which means deception. They had a god of, and interestingly, the god of trust is a woman, Pistis. So I thought it's very interesting. So I just set it up there. And let me introduce you to modern times. 25 years ago, Francis Fukuyama wrote a very influential book, at least at that time. And the book was known as the Social Virtues and the Creation of Trust in prosperity. So 25 years later, his premises are being challenged, to put it very mildly. And here I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Mina Horowitz, where she's going to give us sort of the stage and give us the big picture, because she researched 20 years of what happened to the notion of trust in the world of media. Professor Mina?
Thank you, Dr. Montero. Thank you for this really timely topic. In this list of shout outs, my shout out to my colleague and actually de facto my other boss, Janne Matikainen, who included me in his research work, where we studied actually trust in 10 years and the change of trust during the sort of social media explosion. But I would like to bring us to today, starting by saying that we all know how a couple of years back everybody started to talk about the post-truth era, right? But I would almost call our era even more than that, the era of post-trust. And why do I say this? I would like to show you an illustration. Jennifer, dear, can I have my first slide, please? I don't know if this is quite visible to all of you, but this is actually one of the first pages of Edelman Trust Report. And the Edelman Trust Report is a consultancy report studying trust all around the world. I believe it's 32 countries. And see, since 2001, they've had kind of a slogan for every year. What's key trend in terms of trust that year? Look at 2021. Declaring information bankruptcy. Can I have the second slide, please? And this is what we globally think about the media, news organizations. Biased, biased, biased. There is no trust. Of course, Edelman is not the only organization studying trust. There are all kinds of polls and surveys of institutional trust, whether it's the media or the government or the corporations or the NGOs. And most are concentrating on studying sort of general trust in the institutions. But also lately, we've seen a lot of academic research around trust, and that starts to discuss things like, what does trust really mean? What do people mean when they say they trust something? Or how can we rekindle trust, for instance, trust in journalism and news? But at the same time, although we have several of these global rankings and so on, we know also very little about cultural and contextual issues regarding trust. We kind of know just the surface of trust based on research. So the work in understanding the sort of post-trust era is only beginning. We still live in precarious times, and some call our times the epistemic a crisis of what we actually know and how we know the world and how we understand the world. But at the same time, I would claim that we're also in an emotional crisis, how we relate to one another, to others. And that's why I think it's this series that has, in its underlying philosophy, the idea of communication and civility. That's how we started this series. This is such a perfect platform to discuss trust. Can I have my last slide, please? So we know from political science that trust is not only rational, it's also emotional. So not only facts matter, but how they present it and how they relate to us. And of course, our understanding, our ability to get information and our critical abilities to understand what it means and the source criticism and all of that is important. But trust is also relational. It has to do with how we relate to one another, how we relate to the institutions. And that's why also I think emotions matter and civility matters. So dear panelists, dear audience, I call for you to think about the fundamentals and the basics. What is trust? How can we understand its elements? And how can we regain it with communication? Because communication is the way for us to relate to one another. And I finished with the words of a brand new book. It's called Mistrust. It's by Ivan Zuckerman, who used to be a technologist and coder and became one of the foremost scholars of social media and digital technologies. And excuse me? Excuse me?
Would you please remain muted?
I think. So anyway, the book is called Why Losing Faith in Institutions Provides the Tools to Transform Them. And I want to quote him, since he was creating our digital tools and now he is trying to think how to rekindle with them. Mistrust in institutions demands that we consider efficacy when we decide what actions we wish to take to change the world. We need to imagine, demand, and build institutions that, using the current issues, that isolate patients, so uncivility, before an outbreak becomes a pandemic. And then he concludes, my biggest fear is not that mistrust makes us disengage, but that we fail to imagine change at the scale we truly need. So my last question to you, dear panelists, is, of course, what kind of scale of change we need to rekindle trust? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Horowitz. And now may I invite Dr. Joseph Trappel from the University of Salzburg. He has a very exciting topic of datafication, digital media, and trust. Dr. Trappel, please.
Yes, good morning in New York and good afternoon in Asia, and hello here from Central Europe. It is a great pleasure to give you a few ideas and thoughts about this topic, and my intervention, as you say, Basilio, is about the datafication, media, and trust. Can you easily hear me? Is all fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
May I kindly request everyone to remain muted, please? And you may send your questions via the chat.
Okay, this doesn't apply to me, I guess, Basilio.
No.
So. Okay, somebody muted me now, so it's fine again. So these are the little fails we are experiencing in our online conversations. Anyway, I would like to start my intervention with a very current topic. I'm actually living in Switzerland, as some of you know, and in 10 days' time from now, there will be a referendum in Switzerland. And this referendum is on the topic of a so-called EID, which means electronic identity. And the idea here is that Switzerland wants to introduce, as some other countries have already, a certain kind of unique and united login for any kind of services, which stretch from applying for a new passport or having administration things to do with your community, or all the way down to commercial services where you can buy stuff online and so on, so that you have a one and only electronic identity. This, as we all know and we experience over the last years, is a very useful feature. And for all people living in a digital environment, this is important and makes life easier. Now, why is there a referendum about that in Switzerland? Because there is the following question to answer. Should this eID be issued by the state or by private institutions? Meaning companies like banks or the postal service or insurance companies, they all want to do the eID for the Swiss population. As Switzerland is, as you might know, a highly democratic country, this issue is asked to the citizens, and each and every citizen now in 10 days' time can decide collectively about the way of how this e-identity is going to be institutionalized in Switzerland. I mean, I'm personally a person who is interested in that, and I'm well educated. And I find it very difficult to answer this kind of question, because there is a good argument that the state should issue that. But the opposite side argues that it's much better if private institutions do that, because they are faster in developing things. They can improve the eID, and they make it much cheaper, possibly, because it's not state money involved then, but it's a part of business. And immediately the field is widely open, meaning that any eID is generating data, and who is going to be in control of that kind of data, what kind of use is being done, what kind of use is this data then used for, who controls that, and a lot of questions arise immediately. So this very simple thing, like a login, creates a number of questions, and I think they are all related to trust. Now, Mina and Basilio, thank you very much for opening the question so widely. I'm not going to go back to the Greek mythology, but I would like to go to the very personal element here. And Mina, you said it's about emotions as well. And I was thinking in preparing for this talk, where does trust actually begin in human life? And it very much starts at the very beginning, when we are children. We trust our parents, and without trust, actually, I think it would be very difficult really to raise kids and to grow in a society without trust. So I think we all can only exist if we have a certain amount of trust in our parents, in our relatives, in our family, or at least to the people we are dependent on. So trust is a fundamental value in human existence. Later on in the biography of people, we will find quite a few further institutions. For example, teachers in school, later on at university, in educational systems. This works only if they are trusted. Then it goes on to health services, for example. So the doctor you are visiting, you need a certain kind of trust that you offer your personal story about your personal life to such a person. Then it continues all the way to the banks. Where do you trust banks if you hand over the money you have earned by your work? So we have our life can be written as a story of who are we going to trust and who we are not going to trust. And then we arrive finally at the media. But before I go to the media, the digital media trust issue, I would like to share an observation with you, and that is that trust is a very asymmetrical concept because it takes so long to build and it can be destroyed in a moment. So this is a characteristic of trust which is different to other social relations we might have. So trust needs maybe years to build, and it can be destroyed in a minute. So this makes trust a very sensible and a difficult concept. So in that respect, so if we now transpose these kind of thoughts into the digital world, into the digital media, we arrive at the following. It is to some extent surprising that in the world of digital platforms offered by our famous GAFAM companies, people do not apply the same amount of trust or the same amount of faith as they do in real life. So it is a matter of fact that people trust more if things come on one of these digital platforms. They believe what they see, but at the same time, in their practical life, they have a different approach to trust. So we can see a certain kind of discrepancy here in applying trust to these concepts. So all these kind of worldwide observable facts that in digital platforms, people believe what they see, they believe what they read. They do not apply the same care as they would apply to their personal lives when they're using platforms. This, to me, is surprising. And this, of course, asks for improving the competences, improving digital literacy and things like that, that people learn how to apply a certain amount of skepticism to what they see. But I think it's also a responsibility of the companies. So it's not that easy to shift that only to the individual or take the individual as accountability. I think it's also a matter of the companies themselves. So if we look at how Twitter and Facebook and all the others behaved over the last, let's say, 12 months, with regard, in particular, of course, to the events in the United States and the election campaign and what happens afterwards. I think it is, in fact, important that the companies do realize that they are part of that, of building trust and of losing trust as well. So I think there is a social component here to trust, and there's also an economic component here, meaning that people who trust GAFAM institutions, they are of economic value. And if this is the case, I think we as citizens, we should hold these companies to account in order to be responsible for what they are doing there. And given that we have seen that trust in digital platforms is developing in a different way than in the private personal life, then we can see that the responsibility of these companies is even more important, and we should take them more to account than in the classical mass media, which we experience in a different way, because their trust is built over the years, and some people trust this media, but it can also be lost in a minute, as I said before. So to summarize my little intervention here, I think it is important to realize how trust in personal relationships translates into trust in digital platform conversations and digital platform information. And I think that we need to take digital platform operators into account or accountable for what they are doing there, given the sensibility of trust and given the sensibility of people who apparently behave not very smart and wisely in this platform environment. So for a first statement, I hope, Basilio, this is okay. Thank you for listening.
Basilio, you're muted.
Basilio, we need your mic first, please. Basilio, open your mic, please. Otherwise, we can't hear you. Okay.
Am I okay? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Trappel. And I see that Professor Horowitz already has a comment for you to ask. Later on, she'll come back to you. So now may I introduce to our next presenter, is Dr. Razan Jadan, and she's going to give us a very interesting perspective from the Islamic culture and the role of trust in that particular culture. She comes to us from Dubai. Dr. Jadan?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so Minna, Dr. Minna and Professor Trappel, you opened my mind to lots of other ideas in addition to my ideas that I want to share with you, but I'll stay focused, I promise. I'll leave postmodernity and artificial intelligence, moving to the Arab world or to the Middle East, while, as you see, my first slide is the title of my presentation, Media and Trust in the Middle East, where I will be talking about the reality we live in, the cultures where we built our truisms in, and the images we draw with our pencils out of our perspectives about reality. So I'll just start with the term Middle East to avoid confusion. I allow myself to call the area we are discussing the Arab world, where it relates to the Middle East and the wider region around it. So when I come to the next slide, Jennifer, the next slide I talked about, the next slide is a bit of a summary about the idea of my presentation. So the thought of it is that we live in one reality, which is imposed on us, which influences us. And humans, as we all know, have to acclimate to this reality by finding and creating their physical tools to survive material existence, and by finding and creating their symbolic tools to aestheticize their cognitive coexistence. The next slide shows that by Jenny, do you have the next slide, Jennifer?
Yeah.
To continue the idea, our natural and symbolic survival abilities, tools, and processes developed and are developing continuously in what we call autopoiesis, which maybe this drawing can explain to you. And we come now to the main subject, which is one of the evolutionary appearances of communication is mass media systems and technologies. They reflect, they bridge, and they influence people around the world. This appearance of mass media leads public opinions to understand or to misunderstand reality. Can we go to the next slide, Jennifer? So if I move to the historical background of mass media and trust in the Arab world, I would emphasize or address the relation between, or the bond, the strong bond between the shared word, the communicator, and the public. So especially in the beginnings of the Islamic era, the Arabic historical cultural consciousness focused on the value of the credibility of the spoken word. It focused on the value of the reliability of its transmission, the responsibility of the source and carrier of the word, and the ethical reputation of the communicators of information. So building on that, public communication and mass communication developed from the oral to the written to the printed mass media systems, mass communication systems, with the emergence of the first built printing house in the Arab world when with the French by the French colonials at that time. So here we can say, or from here we can say, started the modern journalism in the 19th century in the Arab world. Can you show the next slide, Jennifer? So if we come to the moving to the modern world and to the postmodern world, of the to the postmodern Arab world, there are some or lots, lots of problematics, or I would call crises, that challenge the Arab world with its societies, public opinions, and mass media. So of course, the first idea I come up with, or my hypothesis, is that there is a lack of trust in mass media in the Arab world, referring to the following situation, where we can say mass media systems developed and are developing continuously, but they never had the space nor the luxury to professionalize or to aestheticize their presence in the public. And this absence of aesthetic and professionality could be presented in some challenges we face. As I put like main ideas here, as you see, and I will be elaborating them now. So the first challenge the Arab world faces is the revolutionary that in the past and even now, the revolutionary and reformative mass media institutions never had the freedom nor the support from the Ottomans, from colonial Europe, from America later, even from their inside after independence. So another point is that mass media institutions had no influential role in society because societies simply were too traditional to believe in journalism as a profession, and because of the lack of education and qualified journalists. So if we come to the modern world or the postmodern world now, in the Arab world, we have quantity of journalism and technologies, but we don't have the quality and the knowledge. Another point on from the aesthetic aspect is, or one of the aesthetic challenges the Arab world faces is the dominance of absolutist cultural concepts and the regional censorship and the international monopolization of mass media as well. Another point or challenge is the absence of commitment and laws, of the commitment to laws and rules that protect society, public opinions and journalists. We have a lack of objectivity of mass media systems being influenced by the local political and social systems and by being influenced or impacted by the international tendencies. We can relate those phenomena to the idiom we all know around the world, or I will remind you of cultural imperialism, as Edward Said called in his literature, or we can remember as well the idiom of cyber imperialism Munch focused on in his researches and literature. Another challenge is that the Arab world is going through 3 gaps of digital communication. So Pippa Norris explains those 3 gaps in the global gap, in the social gap, and in the democratic gap. In the end, or as a last challenge I would like to address is the phenomena of ethnocentrism, which the Arab world has in common with the West, but it carries the attribute, in addition to ethnocentrism, the Arab world carries the attribute of cultural and technological primitivity, which means, what I mean with primitivity is that the modern and the postmodern mass media systems are still in their developmental beginnings because of the following reasons. There is no stability or settledness till now. We never reached that as Arab societies till now. There is no proper academia till now. The Arab world may have the economic abilities to finance the technologies, but there is still no maturity to employ the right brains. another point is that in the current modern, postmodern, and postmodern global circumstances, the societies developed into absolutist, closed culture systems, especially when we observe the political aspect and the social aspect. So primitivity can be observed in that most Arab mass media systems are random, chaotic, and inaccurate when reflecting their public opinions. And another point is that consumption or another appearance in the Arab world is consumption and blind imitation of the West invades the general mainstream attitude in the Arab world. This leads to the absence of authenticity and to intercultural or cultural and intercultural gaps. And if we come to the final point of entertainment, we can see as well that entertainment invades the spheres of the Arab mass media, which reflects the tendencies of the visible public opinion in the Arab world. So if we come to solutions, if we can go to the next slide, Jennifer. The solutions can be summarized in such perplex global environment of interlinked complexities. I would suggest the following solutions. First of all, the Arab world the Arab societies have to strengthen themselves. How? By gaining back their authenticity. They have to approach reality with a mature openness. How? By constructive criticism, pluralism, and wavering destructive narrations. Can we check the next slide, Jennifer? Finally, a last solution that I would suggest for the Arab societies, in relation, of course, to the global scale of communication, is the intercultural concept of elevation, which means, if we go to the next slide, Jennifer, which means creating cultural and intercultural objectivity. How do we do that? When societies reach the mature openness, when the societies reach understanding the naturality of intercultural difference in the one reality, and when we reach the ability to maintain our authenticity, with the next slide, Jennifer, Arab societies will be able to elevate upon their cultural frames with confidence by switching places, by switching perceptions, by switching points of view with other cultures, by interacting mutually and constructively. This would lead us as societies to know each other, to observe oneself, and to learn about the self and each other. And in the last slide, Jennifer, if we reach all those, this mutual and constructive process of communication as Arab societies and on the intercultural level as well, societies can go back to their own cultural frames with new enrichments, reaching new perspectives, reaching development, reaching revitalization, and reaching trust in the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Razan. Thank you, it's wonderful. So please free to the audience to make comments via chat, and I'll be picking them up as we go along. And now I'm delighted to introduce you our next speaker, and Professor Dr. Janne Matikainen. He comes to us from the University of Helsinki in Finland, and he has a very interesting perspective. He's going to address multidimensionality of trust, and I think this is a very important point to kind of look at the kind of following Razan's presentation, that how in the Arab world is working out. I think this will be very interesting follow-up for that. Professor Matikainen.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. We have now afternoon here in Finland, and thank you for invitation for this webinar. Can I have my first slide? Thank you. I will introduce shortly the idea of multidimensionality of trust, and we have a project that Minna already mentioned, and I will show some empirical findings of this project and reveal the idea of different dimensions of trust. But first, can I have next slide? Greetings from Finland. We have very beautiful winter now here. This is from my backyard. Yesterday I take this photo here. But now, next, we in fact, no, not this slide yet. I will show next a video we have done with Minna. It introduced our project basic idea and the data and some results concerning of social media. So can I have the video next?
How the Finnish audience views legacy and social media. Comparative studies on news consumption suggest two major developments: the erosion of trust in the media and the centrality of social media as a news source. The situation is made exceedingly complex as legacy media outlets, politicians, governments, advocates, and citizens operate in the same digital platforms. However, the ways to understand and assess trust in media are still debated. The challenges of disinformation have overshadowed many varied and complex experiences of trust that social media have brought about vis-a-vis traditional news media. Finland provides an interesting country case study. As a so-called Nordic media welfare state, Finland is characterized by universal media and communication services. The country has traditionally exemplified both journalistic freedom, but also citizens' unwavering trust in legacy news media and journalism, as well as in the political establishment and the government. The country also features the highest level of media literacy in Europe. So is the erosion of trust a reality also in Finland? How are developments in social media contributing to trustworthiness and credibility of news? The starting point of the project is that the more complex the media landscape, the more complex the feeling of trust and experiences of credibility. We draw from a three-dimensional understanding of trust. The media as an institution in the society and trust related to that, trust in specific news outlets, journalism, topics and themes, and trust as positions of individuals, that is, characteristics and practice audience. This multidimensional understanding of trust is reflected in the multi-method research design. The project builds on surveys conducted a decade ago. The current survey of 2019 replicates and expands on the key questions of power and trust related to social media. For this, the results with qualitative audience focused interviews with media professionals, policy experts and educators, and content analysis. And the spring 2020 has brought about a special element of the study, COVID-19. We conducted a second survey that would highlight the differences to the situation a year prior, as well as offer some comparative elements to other countries. Our study depicts the contradictory role of social media in Finland. Overall, surprisingly little has changed in the past decade. We still trust legacy media as an institution. At the same time, the news is consumed in increasingly varied ways, and social media networks are an important part of those practices. The trust in social media as a whole is not high, though, and the perceived trustworthiness of use of the well-known and used social platforms is currently minimal. Significant distrust in social media can be detected in many, if not most, countries, but even so, it is such a typical feature in Finland, where trust in social networks has diminished steadily and is now way below the EU average. Unsurprisingly, there is a clear generational gap in social media literacy. Younger generations trust legacy media less than older audiences. For young people, contradictory and diverse views on social media are part and parcel of their news experience. Finnish audiences feel they have few possibilities to influence news. The individual journalists, sometimes fortified by their social media presence, seem to be a concern. But the interviewed media professionals and other experts see social media entirely differently. They see it counter with audiences impacted. During the corona crisis, the trust in legacy news media has even increased compared to the earlier results. TV news has been an extremely important corona news source, whereas legacy news organizations present on social media didn't matter that much, only to some 1/5 of Finnish audiences. Online chats and video sites matters even less. The proportion of Finns who said they had encountered false or misleading information on social media was notably less than, for instance, in the United Kingdom or in the United States. In sum, the multidimensionality of trust in social media is a notable outcome of our study. Institutional distrust exists, especially when it comes to social networks. The relationship between audiences and specific news outlets are more stable and trusted, yet always in negotiation. In terms of individual disposition of trust, the third-person perception is strong here. Audiences fear that others may not have the same capacities to distinguish trustworthy and untrustworthy content in the complex and confusing social media landscape.
Okay, thanks for Minna for this video. And the quality of sound is very high, but Minna already shared the link for this video, so you can watch it later also. Can I have my next slide? Next one, please. That one, thank you. I will continue now with the 3 dimension of trust. In this video, we have results from concerning social media, but now these results are from legacy media or news media, and from Finland, as mentioned in the video and the survey results. And the first dimension is institutional or generalized trust. And here is some statements which we think that they show that what people think, what kind of institution is news media or journalism. And for example, the first one, media has a great influence on people's opinions, and most people agree that media has a great influence, and they also think that media has great influence on major political decisions. So we interpret these kind of results that people think that journalism and news media is an institution that have power in the society. So we think that they trust this institution as a very general level. But if we look the next dimension, can I have next slide, please? Specified trust, some special media or news outlets. And in this slide, we have a different Finnish news outlets, and we can see that here is an amount of respondents who find the media very or rather trustworthy. So these are amounts who trust the media, and there are 2 where lower this trust, but they are tabloid evening newspapers. So the situation is different concerning these two media. But we have the MTV commercial and internet use TV, and also other TV, National Public Broadcasting Company, and the last is newspaper in Finland, Helsingin Sanomat. So we can hear that the trust is very high, in a high level. And we have earlier survey in 2007, and it's almost same. So there are some differences, but in the different directions in different medias. But this slide shows that in specific news outlets the trust is very high, and maybe Finland is a little bit a different situation than many other countries. Can I have next slide? Thank you. And the third dimension is we think personal trait of users or audiences. So here, of course, socio-demographical factors in this dimension. And Finnish audiences, they express very high trust, as already mentioned. There are small differences by age, sex, and education, but these differences are not very, very high. But in fact, there is one major factor which shows some differences in in trust. Can I have next slide? In this table, we are we have shared our responded two groups, trusters and distrusters, and on the other hand, we have our parties. We have a lot of parties in political parties in Finland, and we can see here that the trusters group are more bigger than distrusters in almost in every parties, left-wing parties and right-wing parties. But there is one exception, Finns party, which is a right-wing populist party, where it's very much common than other Western Europe countries, and well, I can say that they for example like Donald Trump and so on. So you can understand what kind of party is it, and this is very strikingly exception, because about half of Finns party shows that they are distrusters, and our data shows that in fact this partisan of this Finns party are really different. They have very different attitudes, and they show different kind of trust. So can I have next slide? Some conclusions about this. If we think theoretically and methodologically, these three dimensions leave different aspects of trust, and maybe we should continue and elaborate our ways how to measure trust in these three dimensions. In Finland, that political orientations seems to be the most important factor, as I show in the previous slide. And we have now some ideas that, for example, that there's some kind of connection between trust in inequality. I mean that, for example, the idea of well-informed citizens, if people don't trust media, they are not informed, and could the trust or distrust reveal something about societal inequality? This is now only a question. And of course, the trust is a very close connection to democracy. Well, it could distrust certain democracy in some way, and is some of our dimensions more important than others in that sense? For example, I think it could be more crucial if general or institutional trust is lower than the lower trust to some news outlets. If the audience doesn't trust the whole system, I think this could be a very big problem, but it isn't if they don't trust some specific media. Okay, this is my short comment. Can I have a last slide? Thank you, everyone, and hopefully you shall get some new ideas of our three-dimensional model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janne Matikainen, and you've definitely given us quite a bit to think. And by looking at the comments here, there are some very interesting comments coming to you, which I will bring up to you in a few minutes. And meanwhile, you can read the comments. They're specifically directed to you, so you can start thinking about that. And now I'm glad to introduce you to you, Professor Ruzbe Ali Kafi. He is a professor of film at American University of Dubai. And he's a storyteller. And that's what he's going to tell us, the storytelling and the role of trust in storytelling. Professor Kafi?
Hello, good afternoon to everybody. Guten Tag to some Germans, and we have some also people from Vienna. And I want to say that what I'm presenting today is not really scientific or sophisticated. This is just a model from storytelling and how the news in today's media, news, because of many reasons, and most probably the main reason is engagement. It's being told through stories. If you pay attention to news, even in big news outlets, they don't call it news anymore. They call it story. There is a story, and we want to share this story. But why storytelling in today's media? Because storytelling is very personal, so it's very engaging. So it emotionally engages the audience, and it's also very interactive, and it's easy to consume in this overflowing era of information, and it's not overwhelming for the audience. Next slide, please. So if we want to look at like a storyline, imagine just like a fiction film that you're watching. The main storyline of a fiction film is this. Somebody wants something but has difficulties getting it. So in this somebody is a hero or protagonist. This hero has a mission. In case that I want to tell you, like Mission Impossible, if you watched that film, don't worry if you haven't, I haven't watched it. But in this film, for example, the hero or the protagonist wants to save the world by dismantling a bomb. But there are some difficulties to do that. And some of these difficulties is imposed to this person by the bad guy or the antagonist. That creates the conflict, and the main character or our hero has to overcome this. Next slide. So this is structure. If you look at it, so at the beginning of this story, they will give you the introduction to the setting of it. Where are we? You know, who's the main character, and then what's the problem? And the action starts rising until we reach to the climax of the story, and then the falling of the action and resolution. Why am I showing you this structure of the narrative? Because if you pay attention to today's media, almost all the big news outlets are using this model for further engaging the audience in the process of consuming the news. So what is happening is every day, for maximizing the engagement of the audience, there are some narratives are being created, and these narratives are in form of story to actually maximize the engagement of us with that story. But here, the difference between this and a film or a regular story that you would read is that the narrative is important, because often there is no resolution to the story that you would hear on the news. It's like an open ending story or film, if you like. And why is that? Because this story can be picked up later on other outlets or in the future to give it another direction and to give it another action in a different setting. So what they do is they keep telling you the story. Sometimes it reaches the climax, and you're fully engaged with that story, be it war in Syria or American election or some global warming issue. So they keep you on your feet in the climax of the story. It depends on one day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, and then the action falls. But there is no resolution, because if the moment that there is resolution, it's very difficult to pick up this narrative again and continue the story in other ways of storytelling. Next slide, please. So what is this process of telling the story if you're thinking about factual storytelling? My background is mainly in documentary filmmaking and actually factual storytelling. So what do? We sum it up easily to 2 parts, selecting and then arranging. When you talk about selecting, we start putting together this starting from the research phase, putting together these slices of life and some facts and some documentation, and we gather as much information as we can and then start arrange it to tell our story, which is a factual story. But now the question is, what are these facts? So if you're a filmmaker, or if you want to target a very specific story, but in media and mass media, this is like a monster that has to be fed these facts every day. But in your news, everyday news, there are hundreds of thousands of facts and news that are happening that day. What facts should we pick and tell our story? And then from this, we go to what sources, where do we take these facts? From what sources are we getting these facts? And then the other question is, when are we revealing this information? Because this, in storytelling, this is very, very important. Distribution of information and revealing the information, it has a big effect on the drama that you are creating, which is a big factor in storytelling. So when you are reaching this news to the climax of it, it's very important, when are you telling this information to your audience? And then who are we targeting? So these elements, when you put this together, you can tell a very good story. Next. But now, how are we actually telling this story in our today's media, which is basically through transmedia storytelling? These stories are being curated for you. So it might start from a tweet from Trump, and then later on it goes to Fox News, and then later on goes to newspaper, later on you get it as an Insta story later on. So that's another reason that there is never a resolution to this, because this, in different platforms, they need to tell the story and then continue that story when it was left somewhere else, so it reaches its climax. But what is happening in today's world with social media? This curation, as we all know, is because of your Google account, because of your consumption, digital consumption, because of where you get your news. This is carefully curated for your own taste. So it's not like before that you would get it on the newspaper, or you would get it on news, on TV. Your Instagram feeds, your stories, and all these are being carefully curated for you to see what narrative fits your profile. And this when this happens, you're constantly exposed to new narratives. So these stories are overlapping and overlapping, but what is important is not where is this news going, or what's the resolution of this. What's important is your constant exposure to that very specific narrative. Now, going back to the first part of the storytelling, this narrative will define for you who is your hero, what is the main objective of that hero, and who are the bad guys and enemies, and what is the conflict. So obviously, those news outlets who have more power and more money to put and create these narratives every day, they will be very successful in creating these stories every day, and they put you right away in that narrative, and this is a model. So today it could be global warming, tomorrow can be American presidential election, the day after it could be EU agreements with Iran over nuclear weapon, and all this because they have created this narrative. It's very easy just to put and take all these news, that the stories that has been pre-written. Next, please. Next slide, please. And now the problem is not only what is the mainstream media is actually covering, is also the problem is what's the mainstream media not covering. And if you're interested, for example, to know what's happening currently in Libya, which is not in a state of crisis, but it's not being covered in media, good luck, because now you need to go find your own sources and gather your information and curate your own basically story out of these different sources and make your own resolution. But what is the problem? The problem is this is very time consuming. And because of this, that we are used to consuming story, we don't, especially the new generation, they don't want to spend the time and go and check all the facts and from different sources. They just are ready to consume this. So the audience for this kind of self-curated news, it's very limited. So, and the question also, because of overexposure to this kind of narrative, is always, who should I trust? What sources I can trust? And even if you find sources that you can answer the questions for you, you can never create your own narrative. And when you cannot create your own narrative, that means you don't have engagement. And if you don't have engagement, there is no influence. So, so you're left with these individuals who cannot trust anything. I think my father is a good example of it. He's a news junkie who sits home and watches news every day. And then he asks himself, I cannot trust them. And let's watch another news. And he cannot trust another one. So then I call him and start talking, and he starts nagging about all these lies that he hears every day, because he knows that he's dealing with all these multiple narratives that are being produced every day in this news, and he cannot find himself, his own hero in these narratives. So this notion of trust is very undermined in his world, and so thus he has to have sleepless nights and to make his own story, because he feels very lonely in this combat with all these narratives. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to talk.
Professor Kafiz, thank you so much. In fact, I personally must say, suddenly made me realize things that I have not thought about before. And thank you so much. And I'm seeing the comments in the same way. Many of our in the audience there, they are saying the same thing. So if I may read one comment to Professor Tuffle, are you there? Joseph? Yeah, I see you there. Okay. It comes from one of my colleagues, Professor Mark Jusak. He said, this is a fascinating topic for me. I'm immediately thinking of the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, which is de facto a weird meta institution. It's both public and private. Maybe that type of system will be a solution, i.e. the solution space may not be only binary. Any comments, Joseph?
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. Well, I guess your question refers, or your comment refers to my introductory remark about the referendum here in Switzerland on the EID or electronic identity. Yes, I mean, institutions are the core element of trust. And we know that from media studies for so long. So if you remember the different ways we can classify information goods, and I'm speaking as an economist here. So we have inspection goods, and we have experience goods, and we have trusted goods. And most of the information goods we are consuming traditionally are trusted goods, actually. So we need to trust and believe that journalists, for example, deliver a story which has been nicely researched, and the journalist has asked the right questions, and he has asked the right people, and he makes a story which is true. And we, as the consumers, or we as the listeners and the users and readers, cannot really verify if the journalist has been working correctly or not, or maybe he's telling a lie. We don't know. So we need to trust, and this trust relates to the institution behind it, and that's why brands are so important in the communication field. So this relates very much to what we have heard today, and I appreciate it very much from our colleagues from the Middle East, because I think the storyteller himself or herself is very important for trust. And also what Razan told us, so the credibility in the spoken word has a lot to do with the person who was speaking, actually. So those who tell the story are the ones who carry trust. And I think this is the same mechanism we can observe with banks, to come back to that comment. So if the institution is trusted, then we trust the institution, give the money there, and believe that they are doing good things with it. So in that sense, I think that the institution and the brand is so important here. And that is it seems, an eternal mechanism which is surviving into the digital age as well. So we have in the digital age these kind of huge institutions. They're much larger than any institutions we had before. If you think of Google and Amazon and Apple and all the others. So they are huge institutions, and we are invited to trust these institutions. And the problem is that some of them are not trustworthy, it seems. So that we have certain doubts that these institutions deserve our trust. And I think this is a fundamental problem we are facing, or this is a blow to the way we normally, as individuals, as persons, as we are socialized, as I said at the very beginning, as persons, that we need to trust other people, we need to trust institutions. And if we now have huge institutions which we cannot trust, I think creates a sociological problem and a problem for society at large. And that's the reason why I'm asking for these institutions to be held to account for what they are doing. And I think this is a major sociological and social problem or question we have to address in modern society, in the digital society, that our institutions need to deserve the trust we have in them. So in that sense, these pieces fall nicely together from the presentations we have heard. So I'm really very much appreciating this afternoon. Thank you. Here this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Professor Horowitz, you had a comment to Professor Trappel. Would you please raise it up? Referring to Fiski's skeptical fluidity?
Yes, I had so many comments to each and every one, and I really want to also congratulate all the panelists. It's fascinating, the dimensions. We thought in the Finnish study that we kind of were ahead of the curve talking about multidimensionality of the trust in news, and quite frankly, after our study, there have been several others that suggest different dimensions of that, but this has been extraordinary, so thank you for that. Actually, my last comment, that I posted for Joseph, I think his approach is incredibly important in that brings us all into the sphere of rekindling trust or demanding trust as consumers. And I was in another webinar recently where actually the gentleman who was the whistleblower for Cambridge Analytica, and the young technologist coder, I don't remember his name, he said, well, our coffee makers and toasters are better tested for safety than GAFAM. And this is ridiculous, and we should start to really also take our power as consumers and demand that the trust is earned.
Thank you very much, Mina. Tiffany, would you please take it over from here now?
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you to all the panelists for your presentations. I have notes upon notes and questions I would love to sit down and ask you all, but I'll just start with a few. And I want to address the idea of people's motivations for consuming news or for reading, listening, tuning into different types of news. I'm wondering if the panelists can comment on how trust may be altered due to people's motivations for consuming news in the first place. Is it for pleasure? Is it for relaxation? Is it to keep abreast of the current events? Is it a ritualistic part of their day, sitting down for evening news? Do you think that people's motivations for watching, listening, viewing have any impact on their level of trust?
You have this is addressed to any particular person? Any particular panelist, Tiffany?
Perhaps Dr. Coffey.
Yeah, I think I grew up in a family that, you know, my father always watched news, and he was proud of it. You know, he thought that it's very important to watch news, and as a part of his, you know, ritual. And so I think we still have that, but as I said before, I think this format, storytelling format, has engaged people a lot more today with news, right? Even those who are not were following news anymore, but now they get it on their, you know, on their phone, everywhere they go, they get this story. I just wanted to also comment on the fact that even if we trust, if the audience trusts the news and the journalist, the issue is not the facts. The issue is how the facts are presented in that narrative that I was talking about. So you can check all your facts and they're perfect, you know, but you create that narrative, that narrative falsely leads you to, you know, believing or not believing certain things. This is what's really affecting the trust of people, because after a while, all this, you know, with no resolution, they're bombarded with news, stories. It's engaging. Let's watch it. Part of it is on Twitter. Part of it is on Instagram, transmedia, different platforms. Let's just go and find it. And in this game, you lose yourself and you don't even ask questions about facts. I think you had a very good example of this, with in Trump's era. People would just not ask questions about facts anymore because they were engaged with the story. Because it is personal and it's emotional. You feel it because it follows that narrative structure. So in that sense, I think media people should hire more filmmakers now, journalists.
Thank you so much, Kafi.
Yeah.
If I may, there is a question here to Razan. Question from Romel. What is the role of religion in the Arab world in your very simple, beautiful, and constructive elevation concept?
Religion, it's a complicated topic, of course, in the Arab world, but I think we have it's a bit of a problem in the Arab world. It's not the problem of religion, it's more the problem of structure, the cultural structure of the societies in the Arab world. While we have the difficulty in the mainstream public opinion has or still didn't reach the maturity to differentiate between what is social tradition, what is belief, what is religion. There is no how do you say, a clear defining of the different cultural systems or aspects in the society, in the culture as a whole, or in the cultures as a whole, because the Arab world is a wide range of contains a wide range of different social consciousnesses, different ways of dealing with belief, religion, and social structures, as well as politics. So it's a complicated issue. But in the end of the day, or what I would like to say, referring to the concept of elevating upon cultural frames, is that this concept will not work if societies do not reach the maturity to be to gain back their authenticity and to have a kind of openness, but in a balanced, mature way. This is what we don't have in this part of the world, or we still didn't reach in this part of the world. And here comes as well mass media, the role of mass media, and the role of influencers, social media, and all those ways of communication between societies, within the societies. So as I said, entertainment invades the sphere, if Dr. Kafi can agree with me. So it is a bit of the role of mass media is a bit of as I said before, chaotic and inaccurate and random systems of communication. They work still in this unclear way in reflecting public opinions and in defining the different cultural aspects where religion is part of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a very interesting question for Professor Matikainen. I see you, Matikainen. And that is coming from Ibrahim. And if I may read, he asks, can we see the personals who can make trust in the media? For example, he points Fox News, commentators with celebrity status, like Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, or Ingram, and categorical acceptance from their audience as authoritative sources. So he says, such uncritical adulation has allowed these broadcasters to indulge in rhetoric that moves far outside the purview of reportage to blatant political speech and delving into extremist talking points. How can we classify this kind of trust in the Professor Matikainen's typology?
Thank you. Good question. Maybe this is that the second one, that specific trust to some specific media outlets. If I understand the question right, I didn't find from the chat that question, but I think that the situation is very different in different countries, because Finland, as in our video, shows that this is small country and people share same media, but I think they interpret these news very different ways, because they watch same news and they read same newspapers, but they based on political orientation, they interpret these contents very different way. So, but I can maybe some of you can say something about what kind of situation it in United States, because I don't know that context very well.
No, thank you. I mean, it kind of does offer another way of thinking about this whole thing. Tiffany?
Thank you, Ms. Leo. This question is for Dr. Horowitz. I come from a public relations background, so much of our programmatic research has to do with defining relationships, building them, maintaining them, and a predominant sort of perspective on organizational public relationships has to do with satisfaction and the expectations that people have that they're being met, trust, operationalized as the idea that an organization does what they say they're going to do. So there's a level of dependability there. And then also including openness, meaning that they're consistent in their ability to share their plan changes, things like that. And then commitment as well. So both parties agreeing that the relationship is worth investing in. And I can see all of these at play with trust, but the one that's sort of eluding me that I'm hoping that you can address is what's called control mutuality. And this is defined as the agreement between the two parties, between an organization and their public, over who has the power to influence one another. And I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to that, about how the agreement, or rather breakdown of agreement between the media and their consumers or their public, how that may influence trust.
Thank you for, first of all, Tiffany, you have such an eloquent question and wonderful overview from your perspective, what trust is. And I think this also relates to the question that was posed to Janne, and about this sort of adoration of certain people and presenters, and also this becomes the question of what is actually news. And what we see in Finland, which is a very homogeneous country, has a highest level of press freedom according to different rankings and so on and so forth, all very much known for media literacy education. What we see is that this relationship between the understanding of that media has an impact on you, and then the journalists have certain kind of power, and they have the power and expertise to give you truth and opinions, is kind of understood. And I think Janne's and our survey already showed that. But what it also showed, and we also did some qualitative work, it also showed that the social media sphere has now created a situation where the role of journalists and that kind of exchange of who has power, who has expertise, is getting muddled. In that, journalists are also present on social media. They give a lot of commentary, and there are now a couple of Fox-type journalists who are very provocative, especially on sort of evening or tabloid news, as well as social media, creating this kind of avalanche of commentary, and it's hard to say what is journalism and what is that commentary. So we have this kind of Fox-like personalities that are taking over vis-a-vis journalism institution or vis-a-vis the media as an institution. And the results of some research about what to do about this is exactly what you listed: transparency, transparency, transparency. And also because algorithmic datafied decision making and algorithmic journalism is becoming a practice. Some scholars are very wary of that, because we all know that algorithmics are not depicting the whole society, and they can be very discriminatory as well. So in order to listen to your audiences also qualitatively, not only in data, sense of data, and be transparent how stories are created, why they're created, what the process is. So are the tools so far.
Oh, thank you so much. And just one last comment that I'm going to read, just coming from Mary Ann Mead from UK. It's a very interesting comment, in fact, and I think any one of you, particularly directed to Joseph Trapper. She writes, professional regulation is used to protect the public and through it demand accountability of some groups and professionals. That would suggest that trust and accountability are the two sides of the same coin. In the cases of politicians and business, for example, the level of accountability may often be linked to personal or financial or vested interests rather than the interests of the public, or so may lead to erosion of trust, if not a complete breakdown. So the question, how to increase accountability? Anyone wants to comment on that briefly?
Well, very, very smart question, and I think this goes very much to the heart of our debate here, of how to deal with different interests and how to regulate that. And I mean, the question of regulation has been ventured so deeply over the last couple of weeks, given that all of a sudden Facebook and Twitter decided to close down Trump's accounts there. So this goes very much to the heart of the debate, whether regulation should be there in order to regulate these kind of relations between users and these big institutions, or if they should regulate themselves, being the judges of what we can read and what we have access to. So in that sense, I think we are very much at the beginning of that debate rather than at the end of it. So we have a clear vision of the responsibilities of mass media. We know that they have a certain kind of accountability, and we have regulated that, and we are in control more or less of what mass media do, but we are not at all with regard to these kind of new institutions we have, and they are possibly much more powerful than the older ones. So in that sense, yes, we need we as academics need to discuss this and come forward with ideas how to regulate these new problems they are arising from that. And we are very much at the beginning there. And as you might know, in the European Union, we are now dealing with the Digital Services Act, which is not yet a law, and the debate is boiling up here. So we are very much at the heart of that aspect of communication law as well. And trust is just one aspect of that, I guess.
Thank you so much. And I've requested Professor Thomas Bauer to kind of sum this up for us, and he's been gracious enough to put the cap on our conversation today. Professor Bauer?
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you very much for your contributions, speakers and people who have requested questions. I think it was a really interesting and wonderful talk, very broad and on both levels. It was theoretically interesting as well as practically. And seeing Rospe, I think you gave more theory than you said you do. I will come back to that. and all those theoretical concepts are really practical as well. Because we did not speak about that, but I found what we learned is how do we conceptualize the concept of truth. And I find there's a difference between what is the content of truth and what is the event of truth, how we are doing the truth. And coming back to Rosbe, saying it's a question of how we tell the story, how we talk about what we want to talk about. There's a way, there's somehow a code of media or a code of rhetorics or whatever it is, but there is something we need to rely on, and this is an order. If media and communication gives an order, then this gives us somehow, which was called from Mina before, this gives us a little bit of transparency, because if things are very chaotic and could be anything or everything, so we don't look through. But if there's an order of speaking, or an order of, let's say, an order of mediality, how we use the media, how we produce, and how we intermediate to each other. So if there's an order and transparency of this order, then we find that the dependency is not something that brings us down, but gives us the possibility to be part of what we want to see, what we expect, what we want to communicate. So what I think what we learned is trust is a normative concept, and we have to do a long way of research, as Joseph said before, and a long way of learning democracy day by day in order to make the normative concept to a cultural one, to a structural one. Trust should be somehow not something what we add to communication. It is the key of communication. And the question is, let me say this on this theoretical approach, we are still understanding communication in the paradigm of acting. I'm doing, for example, producing, and you are consuming. I'm speaking and you are listening. So this is always a model of, on the one hand, a model of partnership, but we are dividing the competencies of communication. I think if we have another paradigm of communication, not the paradigm of acting or interacting or transacting, but maybe a concept of observing each other. If we are observing as I observe you observing me, and you observe as I am observing you, this could be another paradigm of understanding this the way of coming together, the way of sharing the truth. Truth is not something which I produce. Truth is always a communicative concept, not something which I do for you or against you or whatever. So I think this is the one, bringing the normative concept to a cultural and maybe even a structural one, because we need somehow, as I understood your contributions, we need a position of appropriating the reality and the relevance, because we are experiencing ourselves in what we are communicating. If we are a part of that, what we communicate, then we are closer to let's say, closer to truth, or closer to, at least closer to fulfill the desire of truth. Trust is also something I understood. It's something which mirrors the sphere of our even human or existential uncertainty has always to do, as Luhmann said, trust always is an investment in risk of disinformation, of discommunication, of chaos, or whatever. So we do not want to fall into that risk. So that's why we try to find somehow ways of certification ourselves and the conditions of communication. So all the speakers, I could go them through, but maybe it's not time enough. But all the speakers I hear, they gave a different level of understanding the concept of trust, not only in communication but also in media. But when you have spoken about media, I understood that you always speak about communication. The question really is, which was somehow not said like that, but a reason like that. There is a question: do media really have to do with communication? Why, or let's say another way, why we think media are somehow a platform or a sphere or a reference or a factor of communication. Both are constructs. Communication is a construct of many things going on, and media as well is a construct of many things going on, many things to do, many things to observe. So bringing those two constructs together is an act as we want to do. It's not a matter of fact, it's a matter of observation as we observe media as a factor, as a sphere, as a place of communication. That brings me back to Rosby saying that the way as how we communicate and the way as we communicate is very important because communication is nothing that has only one way to be done. It's doable in any way, and is always a new act of understanding the communication in every time and in every action and in every place where people is coming, however, together in order to exchange ideas or information. Of course, as Mina says, there's an individual, there's an cultural, there's an emotional and the rational factor in this concept, because it is a concept. It is nothing that you can produce through. Trust is not nothing that you can produce. Trust is always something that we reflect, that we try to understand, that we try somehow to realize, but we cannot produce it. It's so that's why it is always something what we are depending on, what we are desiring, and what we have to reconstruct in every communicative situation we are experiencing or we are doing. There at the end, I think there was an interesting point that given from our last speaker, the interdependence of democracy and trust. My question there was, and I think I did not get an answer yet really for that, is trust a key often for democracy, or is it somehow a basis for democracy, or is democracy a basis or a key for trust? on a theoretical level, maybe it's easy to explain that because both are constructs and they can brought, of course, easily together. But how it is done in practice, we need an order, and we refer to an order, a structural order in the on the field and in the space of classical media, because of professionality, because of structure, because of concepts that we know, like economy and technology and organization. But in social media, on the one hand, as it was said, on the one hand, maybe trust is easier to find in the field of social media, because there is we get connected more, at least more, maybe more authentically to each other than we are connected in the classical media. So authenticity and personality and spontaneity and whatever, those are somehow factors for giving more trust or having more trust or having more trust. But this is not the way as it is done in the classical media. But on the other hand, we feel that especially the social media disorder the system or the mechanism of trust very much. So as Joseph said before, we have to research. On the beginning, we have to research a lot in that. If we want to find a key for the cohesion of the societies and between the societies, we need much more trust, more not in a quantitative way, but more in a qualitative way. And in this sense, we are, as you say, that we are still on the beginning. Okay, let's go on in that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Bauer. And to close, let me quote Herman Melville writing in his Moby Dick. And this is what he says. He writes, "We cannot live only for ourselves. 1,000 fibers as sympathetic threads. Our actions run as causes, and they come back to us as effects." In today's New York Times, David Lenhard, writing about COVID absolutism, he ends his piece by stating, "Trust is the currency of public health." So I can't leave it there. And I want to thank you everyone for being part of this exciting conversation. And I think we can keep talking about this quite a bit for a long time to come. But I think you got us to think in many ways and in some new ways as well. And I really, really appreciate your being part of the discussions and the audience as well from different parts of the world. So thank you. And we look forward for our next global conversations. In fact, we have 2 more planned for the month of March. They're celebrating Dante Alighieri's 700th birthday death. So we have to do something, and then something on climate change. So we'll do that. We'll keep you posted and join us. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and rest of the day or rest of the evening, wherever you are. And we'll be in touch for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.